Hi, friends, and welcome to this episode of Relational Skills in Real Life. This is Kristy Harang, Director of Operations for Thrive Today, and I've been temporarily stepping in for Chris Coursey for our series of interviews with our Thrive team members and trainers. And today we are wrapping up our series, and I'm very excited to have our co-founder and Executive Director, Jen Coursey, joining us. So hi, Jen.
Hello, good to be with you.
It's so fun to have you here, and we thought this would be a really fun way to wrap up the interview series by doing this together, partially because we started with Chris, so it's really fitting that we're wrapping up with you. But also, we were talking about how who's going to interview me. So we decided that you and I would come and do this together and we would interview each other. So you get a two for one in this episode, everybody.
I'm excited. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So, Jen, we typically start by talking about our history with Thrive Today, like how do we get to know about Thrive Today and relational skills. Now, as our co-founder, you are a little unique. You kind of have known about Thrive Today from the beginning.
It's true. Yep.
But I thought it'd be fun to hear about how you first heard about relational skills because there is a little bit more backstory to that.
Sure. Well, I was in a pretty messy place in my life and just trying to figure out what is going on? Like, why can't I function? And that was when I was introduced to the Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You book, the life model, and discovered that discovered maturity, discovered the idea that there were these, well, relational skills. We weren't quite calling it that yet, or they weren't quite calling it that yet. But it explained so much. It just helped me see this is what's missing and this is why I'm not really functioning. And by the time we got around to counting them and naming them, because when we were first teaching people about them, even in the early iterations of Thrive, people would say, so what am I learning through this exercise? Because we do a lot of exercises at Thrive. What am I learning here? And you'd be like, that's a great question. You're learning something really good for your brain. Don't try to ask me to articulate it beyond that right now, because we're still trying to figure it out. So it was fun being able to count them, name them, define them, and then look at all the exercises and say, which skills are we using here? Which skills are we practicing? All of that. But once we had done that and we counted up 19 of them, it made a lot of sense. It was a few years after I had been introduced to these and I'd been practicing them, even though I didn't know what to call them yet. Um, and it just made so much sense. I was like, oh, I had 0 out of 19. That's why I was not really functioning. I couldn't do any of these. And isn't it wonderful to be able to name them and identify them and also be able to say, wow, I've been working on all of those. And isn't it exciting to see growth like that?
Wow, that's so cool, Jen. And you were very central to that process, right, of naming them and all of that.
Yeah. The Chris and Jim did the first, came up with the first iteration of the training before I was really involved in that part. But by the time we got around a couple years later, I got involved early on, but by the time we got a couple years into it, into saying what exactly are we teaching and what is we going to call it and how many skills are we trying to learn, that I helped with that. I'm a organization person. I like to be able to count them and name them and know what they are. And so I got to help that process with the guys.
Oh, that's fun history. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah. Oh, what about you? So yeah, we get to interview each other, which is fun.
Yeah.
So how did you get introduced to relational skills and or in Thrive Today?
Yeah. So my husband and I were heading up a ministry with our church that helped with freedom and inner healing. And we were both super passionate about transformation and healing and connection with Jesus. And Nick, my husband, came across some life model books. And life model, if again, we've mentioned it quite a bit in our podcast. If you're not familiar with it, we'll put a link so you can learn more about what the life model is. But he came across some books and he was like, lit up. He was like, this is what we've been missing. I knew something was missing, and this is it. So he started following the rabbit trail. Where do I learn more? Where do I go? What do I do? And someone directed him to Thrive Today's premier training. So he went to Flex Track. This was in 2017. And then shortly after, we went through a big season of transition, not knowing what we were doing. And so Nick actually volunteered with Life Model Works for a year. And that year he took me to Thrive training to go through track one. I didn't know a ton about it and what it was all about, but man, it was the most joy-filled environment I'd ever been to. It was wonderful. And then in 2020, I joined the team with Thrive Today.
And we are so glad to have you on the team.
Thank you. I can't believe it's been so long and I love it. It's just the best
Yeah.
team to work with. So Jen, we're going to talk a little bit about skill 11, return to joy, and how this skill's made an impact in our lives. And so we want to just help people know a little bit about return to joy. So essentially, you guys, we all get stuck in emotions, sadness, anger. We have times where we just get stuck there. So this skill is helps us to get back to a place of peace and joy when we've gotten stuck, when we've lost our peace, so that we can feel this emotion and get back to peace and joy and connection with other people in the midst of what we feel. Jen, maybe you could share about the 6 big emotions and the different pathways with this skill.
Yeah. So when Chris writes about it, he and Marcus Warner have written a number of books together, and they like to call it the sad emotions, like with the acronym or acrostic, actually, I guess.
Yeah.
But so we have sadness, we have anger, we have disgust, we have shame, we have like feeling afraid or fear, and we have hopeless despair, which is, they're all hard emotions because they're emotions that have taken us from our joy home base. So
Mm.
we're feeling something other than joy in those moments. Um, Although interestingly, as we talk about return to joy, we can also add joy in while we're feeling those emotions, which is kind of, it makes sense when you think about it, but at the same time, it's also feels counterintuitive.
Yeah, a little
Um,
mind bendy.
yeah, a little mind bending. That's a good way to put it. And um, these are the big 6 emotions that our brain knows apart from joy. And our brain desires to be able to live in rhythms of joy and peace. And these are the things that take us away from that home base. And so ideally, we have roads back to that home base, back to that home base of joy and peace. And we actually need a road for each emotion because they're kind of like in different spots in our brain. And just because we know how to get from sadness back to joy doesn't mean that we know how to get from anger back to joy. Like it's a different pathway, a different road. And so we actually have to build those roads in our brain for each of those big 6 emotions.
Yeah, which is so helpful, right? Because it helps us understand why I can be around someone and they're great if sadness is present or, shame is present. But the second anger, they're feeling angry, they turn into a different person is because just because we can deal well with one emotion doesn't mean we can do well with another. So in a sense, Jen, this return to joy is almost like a 6-for-1 skill because we really,
It's true. It's true. We could have said there were 25 or whatever,
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so we grouped them all under one, but it is 6 skills within one because we
Yeah.
do actually need to learn that return to joy in each of those negative emotions. And the interesting thing is a lot of people think about return to joy as an absence of the emotion, like I'm back to feeling happy. But that's not actually what we mean. And it's a good thing too, because one of the things that kind of feels daunting to people is that we say that our brain should be able to get back to joy in less than 90 seconds from one of these emotions. And people are like, really? I mean, fear's not going away in 90 seconds. Hopeless
Right.
despair is not going away in 90 seconds. Um, so it's not that the emotion completely disappears, it's that we have gotten back to um, being relational in the midst of an emotion.
Yeah.
Somebody's with me and glad to be with me in it. And our definition of joy is that somebody's glad to be with me. And so it's a
Right.
relational joy. And so we can experience sadness and joy at the same time. So we might feel sad and heavy, but we are feeling joy because somebody is glad to be with us in it. And so we're glad to be together in the midst of this hard thing. And that is kind of the essence of that return to joy concept.
That's beautiful. I love that, Jen. The last thing I'll quickly mention before we dive into our stories is that you might be like, oh, there's six, only six. There's variations of these six, and there's also combinations. So obviously, there's like a wide variety of things that we can feel, but they all are rooted in these six, and that kind of helps. At least for the unpleasant emotions, they're rooted in these six.
Mhm.
So Jen, I'd love to hear a little bit about how this skill has made an impact in your life.
Well, so again, this was one of the ones I did not have, and I didn't have it in any of the emotions to start, but there were a couple emotions that were the biggest holes or the biggest gaps, and the ones that um, had the lack of that had the biggest impact in my life because both fear and hopeless despair, I spent a lot of time and energy and effort avoiding having to feel them because I didn't know how to recover back
Hmm.
to joy from them or be able to stay in relationship in the midst of them. And so fear was one of the early ones I tackled. It was kind of consuming my trying to avoid things and trying to plan ahead and figure out how to not have to be in a situation where I felt any fear. Um, and so being able to face my fear made such a difference. Being able to sit in it, that was one that was really non-existent for me. I had to have somebody
Hmm.
who could sit with me in my big feelings of fear and who knew how to navigate that and could still be glad to be with me in the midst of feeling fear.
Yeah.
And it showed my brain a new pathway. And so after I finally started learning how to sit in instead of run from or avoid or figure out how to not have to be in situations where I felt fear, um, it was amazing how much of an energy saver that was because it took so much more energy. My fear of feeling fear was
Hmm.
way worse than feeling the fear itself. And so the energy that I put into trying to not have to feel fear, um, when I didn't have to do that anymore and I could just enter into it and feel it and then recover, it's like, oh, wow, that was a big deal for nothing. I mean, not a big deal for nothing, but you
Hmm.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there was this build up in advance, like, oh, I'm afraid of feeling that fear. And then when I went into it, it's like, oh, it didn't kill me. I survived that and I can face that and I can live through it and get to the
Hmm.
other side. So fear was thankfully one of the early ones that I tackled in my journey. Hopeless despair is one that's honestly been later in my journey. I worked on it some as I was learning all the different emotions. Like, if I can just figure out how to fix this situation, it won't be hopeless. If I can just figure out how we won't get into a hopeless situation and I can plan ahead well enough, then I won't have to. If I can just manage these things or, have the illusion that I'm in control, then I don't have to feel hopeless.
Yeah.
So that one snuck under the radar longer. And probably 5, 6 years ago, maybe now, the Lord kind of started highlighting that, yeah, this is maybe not something you're doing well yet, even 20 something years into my journey of practicing relational skills. So it's a lifelong journey. It's not like a overnight, everything's fixed,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Um, but then that's how life is, right? We're always growing, and this is just part of our growth. So
Yes.
with hopeless despair, I just again, people sat with me in it. The Lord sat with me in it, and the Lord helped me see that um, when I can acknowledge I can't fix this, I don't have the resources, I don't have the energy, I don't have the knowledge, I can't change this circumstance. That I can grieve the fact that I can't change it and then kind of be open hands for like, all right, Lord, that I'm grieving that I can't have this thing that was important to me or this whatever it was, um, this health in my relationship or this, from big to like relationships to little to getting out the door on time kind of thing.
Hmm.
um, and I can instead be open hands to Lord, what do you have instead? And whereas before I was just kind of laser focused on, no, this is where we're supposed to get to, so we are going to get there, run myself or other people over or not.
Yeah.
um, so it's just both of those, the lack of being able to face them and go through them, um, were really kind of controlling my life in different seasons. So it just has been a huge impact. I feel so much freer and just like I don't have to be afraid of what's going to come my way because there's joy and peace on the other side of it and in the midst of it.
Yeah. I love that, Jen. And I love what you highlighted the fact it's so often it's not the emotion itself, it's the fear of the emotion. And that's with also a lot of things we fear in life. We fear how, if this happens, we're afraid of how it's going to make us feel.
Hmm.
That's really what we're ultimately afraid of. And so that fear really gets us stuck, and I love how even Chris talks about, as we the emotions like a wave, like we learn to enter into the wave versus avoid the wave, and then we, like you said, I got through it and realized I didn't die, I'm okay. And so we start to neutralize that fear of the emotion. We build confidence that, oh, I am going to survive, I'm going to feel this, and I'll be okay on the other side. That is life changing. Yeah.
Hmm. What about you? How has skill 11 returning to joy made a difference in your life?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying I was an emotional wreck. I really struggled a lot with fear, with shame, had no clue of shame though. Anger was kind of my cover for shame because I couldn't deal with shame. I get angry a lot. So I had a lot of anger in my life and a lot of fear, and it could debilitate me. Things could debilitate me emotionally for days, weeks. I just get knocked off my piece. And what I'd say is I had a decent amount of joy in my life. I had very little peace. I didn't actually even really know what peace felt like. And way before I learned, not way before, but just before I learned about relational skills, God gave me a sweet season where life was slower, and I began to discover what it felt like to have peace. And then I was like, oh, this is like amazing. And so then I was willing to fight for peace. I wasn't willing to not have peace in my life anymore. And so relational skills came in at a really good place where, I began to understand how to process through emotions and work through them, which was such a helpful catalyst to be able to say, okay, if I'm getting triggered and feeling really angry or I'm feeling fearful, I actually now know what to do with that. I know how to navigate it, and I'm not stuck. And even just the awareness of how powerful bringing awareness of our emotions, putting words to our emotions, being able to share what we feel, that is so powerful because that neutralizes, for me, that neutralizes the bomb of the emotion quite a bit, just being able to express it that way. Um, but I would say, so it's made a huge difference for me because I was emotionally unstable, and God has built steadiness over the course of my life. And He has used this skill to help me be a steadier person. And like you said, to be less afraid of emotions, to say, okay, let's actually look at them and then let's feel them. That's counterintuitive. I'm still learning to say the goal is not to run from it. The goal is to like run to it, get in it, feel it, and God will bring you out the other side. But it's also been so life-changing because I didn't want my kids to be hotheads or to lose their temper like I did. I didn't want them, so I would shut them down, and I try to shut down a lot of what they felt, not with everything, but with some of the emotions. And so one of my kids in particular he was like my most fiery feeling kid, and he became very dismissive because of the way that I shut him down, the way we shut him down. And so he was like one of those kids that's like, I'm fine. I never feel anything. I'm good. And I knew that wasn't true because I knew he was such a fiery person emotionally. And so actually developing my own ability to feel what I feel and to navigate that has helped give me bandwidth to be present with him and what he feels. And it's taken time because, here he is dismissing, I don't feel anything. It's taken time to build this safety and this comfort where he can start testing the waters of actually feeling things and expressing them to me. And God has done these sweet healing moments where he's felt really big feelings and then he's felt safe to express it. And because I can be there with him, it's almost like we can ride the wave together, and he's starting to become more in tune with his emotions again and feel them again. And so I'm seeing change in me. I'm seeing change in my family, my kids, my ability to be there with them. We're still in process, but I'm just so thankful for it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's awesome. It's so exciting to hear how these things are impacting people. Early in this process, Chris's mentor Jim Wilder said, "No, don't teach and train the things that have changed your life. If it hasn't changed your life, let somebody else do it." And so that's kind of been our guiding our guidance really for what to focus on. And these things have changed our lives. And we like to say we still don't do them perfectly, but we teach and train it because it's changing our lives, and we want to get other people to be able to experience that as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, let me say if you guys want to learn more about Return to Joy, you want to learn how to navigate your emotions in healthier ways, I have a few resources for you. Chris has two awesome podcast episodes. He has more than two, but 59 talks about the Return to Joy skill, and 89 talks about emotion mythbusters. So check those out. And then if you're like me and you notice, like, man, I'm kind of an emotional wreck, I don't have a lot of joy or peace, we recommend you look at building capacity so you can actually strengthen your baseline of joy and peace. Get that home base started before you try to create these pathways back to joy and peace from the emotions. And you can do that by learning about our foundational 5 skills. Our foundational 5 intro course is a great place to get started. If you've already taken that, you could take any of our habit builder courses to go deeper in your foundation. And then if you feel ready to start looking at emotions and navigating pathways back to joy from those emotions, we have a navigating emotions course, and it takes you by the hand in practical exercises that will help you build awareness of what you're feeling and give you tools for learning how to process through those feelings in healthy ways. So, with that, Jen, thank you so much for being with us and joining us today and interviewing
Well, and
me.
thank you too, because yeah, thank you for sharing your stories as well.
Yeah, it's been really fun. This series has been delightful. If you guys have missed Chris, he will be back next week. If you haven't caught all of our interviews, go back and listen to him. We have a fabulous team and really great podcast
Mhm.
episodes that I think you'll find very encouraging. So, with that, we thank you so much for joining us for this series and for this episode of Relational Skills in Real Life. And we look forward to seeing you next time.